Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Damon Levine, and I'm a facilitator here at Prude. And I want to welcome you to the last in our Black History Month speaker series. This is a series of free interactive online talks by presenters from around the province who share stories on many subjects related to both Black history in New Brunswick, and the present-day Black community in the region. This includes talks on subjects ranging from Black loyalists and Black refugees, famous firsts, entrepreneurship, personal uplift, and even poetry reading. So today's talk falls into the personal uplift category. Today's guest is a Nigerian-born designer, St. John resident, Nigerian-born designer, entrepreneur, and educator with more than a decade of successful experience in teaching and the management of education-based social enterprises. She holds an MBA in entrepreneurship and technology management from the University of New Brunswick. In addition to her fashion business, Kama Designs, she also works as a language instructor at the YMCA of Greater St. John. She's held prior roles at Xerox, TD Bank, and JD Irving Company. Our guest founded Kama Designs in 2017, which is an African-inspired, trend-setting clothing brand whose corporate social responsibility prioritizes poverty reduction through girl-child education and female empowerment. She specializes in the application of business solutions to social problems. A passionate believer in the societal gains embedded in the empowerment of the girl child, she's the organizer of Fashion Power, an annual fashion show which provides a platform to fundraise for Canadian charities, and Girl Child Education Initiative in Africa, the Girl Child Education Initiative. In the fall of 2019, Fashion Power, in partnership with the YMCA of Greater St. John, recorded a phenomenal success with more than 200 people in attendance at its event. The event was a celebration of African culture through fashion, dance, and food. So our guest volunteers as a board member of Prude Inc. and occasionally speaks at youth engagement sessions. You will often catch her enjoying a good African movie. And incidentally, speaking of good African movies, you might want to Google Nollywood. That is Nollywood to see what we're talking about there. She enjoys watching motivational videos or reading titles by her favorite self-help and motivational authors when she is not busy with work or with family. Our guest currently resides in St. John with her husband and their three beautiful daughters. With her presentation today, she reminds you to own your story and reshape your history. Our guest talks about the need for Black people to take ownership of their own stories by telling them in a manner that they should be told, and not just about slavery and oppression. It is my honor today to welcome Ms. Christine Eruokwu. Christine, how are you?
I'm very fine. Good afternoon, Andrew, and thank you very much for that beautiful introduction. I really appreciate that, and thank you for having me here. I'm really honored to be one of the speakers, and so on that note, let's go. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for choosing to spend your lunch hour with us today on this episode of the Prude Black History Month speaker series. So today, my role or my goal is simple. The goal of my presentation today is just to remind each and every one of us, especially everyone with African heritage, that we have a wonderful history behind us. And this should actually be an opportunity or a platform to inspire us to greater achievements. So on that note, I want to just introduce myself briefly, okay? And my name is Christine Eruokwu, as Damon already introduced me. And by virtue of my last name, my heritage is traceable to 4 distinct identities based on my tribe, nationality, continent, and race. So what that means is I'm from Igbo land in Nigeria, which is in the western part of Africa. And then ultimately, I am proudly a Black woman. Most of you may not know this, but our African names often tell stories about the circumstances of our birth, our social status, positions in the family, or sometimes even our aspirations. Our identities as Africans are tied to our names. which is why it is difficult for some Africans to change their last names, especially when they are job hunting, because this is tantamount to stripping them of their heritage. So with that intro and background, I just want to dive into today's presentation. Okay, so the theme for this year's Black History Month celebration is "The Future is Now." I really love this theme because sometimes I feel that the story of oppression and slavery is long overflowed, and we want to talk more about aspirational stories, things we want to look up to, things where we want to be. We have a great history, but what does the future look like for us, for our children and generations unborn? We want to be able to reshape our stories. Yes, we know what our background is like, but what does the future hold for us? And so I really love this beautiful quote from Maya Angelou. She says, for Africa, to me, is more than a glorious fact. It's a historic truth. No man can know where he's going unless he knows exactly where he has been and exactly how he arrived at his present place. So why am I talking about Africa? Because when we talk about Blacks in New Brunswick or Blacks or African Americans, African Canadian, the entire journey begins from Africa. So, and that is why for us to be able to go forward, we need to know our roots and why it's important for us to embrace who we are and why we do what we do. Okay, so next slide. Before we go into details of the presentation, I just want to share 4 interesting facts about Africa. So first thing you need to know about Africa is like there are just 54 countries with 10 territories and 2 de facto independent states with limited or no recognition. And then one interesting fact about Africa is like it's the source of the world's longest river, and that is the River Nile. The second interesting thing about Africa is that the richest man, according to history, the richest man that ever lived was an African. His name was Mansa Musa, and he was the emperor of the Mali Empire. At the time of his death, his net worth was over 400 billion. The third interesting thing about Africa is that it's the world's largest and tallest and fastest animals, that is the elephant, giraffe, and cheetah, are all in Africa. And the last but not the least is that Africa is home to the largest wildlife migration. For those of you who don't know, it's like in Tanzania, where we call the Serengeti, millions of animals migrate through that region. So just some quick facts for you to know. Next slide. So every time people ask about Africa, or every time Africa is mentioned, the story or the images that come to your face or come to mind are stories of war, conflict, poverty and starvation, and of course, terrorism. And that is why when Africans migrate to other countries, they're being looked down upon as very impoverished people. They're looked down upon as people who need foreign aid in order for them to achieve their aspirations. This is a very painful truth. However, you wouldn't blame the journalists and the media people who do this, because we have allowed them to tell our stories. If we told our stories ourselves, I guess we'll tell much better stories. And so I will take you through some aspect of Africa that people do not know much about. And so that takes me to the next slide. So if you look through these pictures, there's a common denominator. Each of them is an African, as in an African. And these people all over the world are telling positive stories about Africa. The first picture here the man in white is Dr. Oluyinka Olutoye. He was the first doctor to ever perform a surgery on an unborn baby. This baby was actually called born twice, and this story happened sometime last year. Dr. Okonjo-Iweala happens to be the first ever female Director General of the World Trade Organization. Mr. Adebayo Ogunlesi is the owner of the Gatwick Airport in London, in the UK. And he acquired that asset, the whooping sum of £1.5 billion. Elon Musk needs no introduction, really. But recently, he was named about the richest man in the world. For Idris Elba, his father is a Sierra Leonean and his mother a Ghanaian. So he's an authentic African. He's a British-born African. And for the international actress, Charlize Theron, she is from South Africa. And she has made an impact on the world scene. These individuals are professionals who've made their mark in the world, but people never relate to them really as Africans. And so when the stories of Africans are being told, people like this don't come to mind. It is those gory images of poverty and starvation that people see, because we've given them the power to tell our stories. Okay, next slide. And so that brings me to the next thing I want to talk about today. Africa is, like I said earlier, is always often described as a very poor continent, very impoverished, that should rely on aid to survive. But when you take a look at this picture, this isn't the picture of a country that should be poor. It is completely surrounded by wealth, natural resources. And sometime last year, Al Jazeera put up this post. It says, Africa is not poor. We are stealing its wealth. I didn't say it. Al Jazeera did. So why wouldn't Africa be an attractive continent with such wealth? And one way some of this wealth can be extracted is to instigate conflict among Africans so that the West and other opportunists will be able to extract that which the Africans have. And it's unfortunate. We truly wish that the stories are different. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the dominant narrative in in the Western states is that Africa is poor and relies on foreign aid. But when you look at this picture, about 30 billion comes in foreign aid, but over $192 billion leave Africa every year. And this often in the form of cost to debt, exported natural resources, and very different other avenues. So a picture like this, if anything, should make us proud to be who we are. It's unfortunate that we struggle with good governance. We struggle with bad leadership. But if things were right, Africa shouldn't be where it is today. We may not be able to do anything on a global level, but in our own little ways, we could do a lot. And that's one of the reasons I'm so happy and proud to be a part of this series, so that I can share my own African story, so that the world will get to see Africa as it is. A wealthy country filled with rich, natural, human, and natural resources, and not the poor, needy continent that we're made to believe. Okay, so next slide. so far, up to until this point, we've talked about the skilled professionals in Africa. We've talked about the wealth of the continent. Now, let's take a look at some of the unskilled people in Africa who are bringing so much pride and glory to the continent. So I don't know if some of you know about the very popular Ghanaian fantasy casket or coffins. So the entire story of this beautiful casket was just started by one man and his family. And so the entire story began with a man who wanted to honor his late grandmother. As you can see on the slide, his mother has passed, his grandmother had passed away, and he wanted to give her a befitting burial, something that will tell the story about her passion and aspiration she never got to live. So he built her a very beautiful casket, and ever since, it took off. So today, Ghanaians are known for the fantasy caskets that they build and then they send to the world. And it's something that needs to be shared. Next slide. So here are some of the pictures of what this casket looked like. The first picture to the left, if you look closely, you'll see it has Air Canada to it. And so this was the very first casket that was built, the one that Quay built for his grandmother. I don't know why Canada was the country of choice, but for some reasons, it was Air Canada. I thought this was pretty neat and it was something we could share. Most people who bury their loved ones in this casket, they always want to, okay, let me put it this way. So in Ghana, when loved ones are being buried, they are seen to be sending them off to the afterworld. And they want to take them to the afterworld in comfort and style. So they want people to see what the aspiration was, what the person's dreams, or what the person's passion, or even his career. So for someone who was a fisherman, a fish-like casket would be an ideal one. For a pilot, for a teacher or a scholar, a pen would be the ideal casket to send them to the world beyond. So this is something about Africa that the world should know more about. In most Western world than Europe, Ghanaians actually export this thing. So if you take a look at this, this is one of the museums in Germany where one of the caskets is being put on display. So it tells you that we have something that even the unskilled people in Africa, they've got so much skills that it's worth exhibiting the European museums. And this makes me really proud to be an African, and I'm so happy to share this. And so I believe this should actually be the eighth wonder of the world, my opinion. Okay, next slide. Now, when you go to Uganda, so the people of southern Uganda, even before introduction of weaving and wax print and this, they had a technique of producing fabrics that far predates what we currently have today. I wish I could share the video I have, but I'll definitely share the link with Andrew so that you can see a video of how these clothes are being produced. According to UNESCO, the method of producing these clothes is about the most sustainable in the world. Trust me, these guys are people with little or no, in fact, these are illiterate men in Uganda. No education, but their skills speak for them. And they've allowed themselves, to tell their stories in their own way, in a way that brings out the best of their culture, the best of their skills, the best of what they want to share, and not stories that dehumanize them or bring them down.
Excuse me, Christine.
Yes.
I'm loving what you're sharing here, and I was thinking when you were talking about the Ghanaian casket builders, are West Africans familiar with any of the traditions that survived in enslaved people in the Americas? Because we over the past, I'd say 40, 50 years with Black consciousness in the Americas, we've done a lot of work on our side to kind of figure out which traditions actually were not obliterated by slavery. They might have been altered a bit. There's one thing that we do with funerals, and I'm a Black American, and it's one thing we do with funerals is we actually call them homegoings. Is that something that people in West Africa say as well? You're going back home?
Yes, especially when the person is an advanced, maybe someone who has lived a very fulfilled life and, have attained. So say someone over the age of 70, 80, 100 is considered homegoing because, well, he's accomplished everything he or she was supposed to accomplish. So it is considered homegoing. But when a young person dies, it is not considered homegoing.
No. Okay. That's interesting. I never knew that. I never knew it was broken down by age like that. That fascinates me.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes, it is. For most part of Africa. Much. Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome.
I'll jump out and keep listening.
Oh, that's fine. Thank you. Okay. So when you take a look at this picture, you see the people of Uganda. So actually a tribe called the Baganda tribe of Uganda. So these clothes are made from the bark of trees. They do not cut down the trees. They actually peel off the bark of the trees, process them through some long, arduous process, and then use them for different needs, which could range from clothes, loin clothes, wall hangings, even beddings. And so you could tell the status of the people or the wearers based on what color they wear. So the regular Ugandan or Bakanda, if I can use that word, would wear the reddish one. But for the traditional rulers or the king or the chief, they will have to wear a light colored one with some spotted, looking like a leopard skinned, looking like the animal skin fabric. So now, if some people in rural Uganda were doing this thing as early as the 15th, what do you think really happened if some element of technology was thrown in the mix of this? Okay, so next slide, please. So this is what the modern backload looks like. So today, Ugandans export, so they've been able to harness these very beautiful clothes that they have, okay? And now they've taken it to a level where it's been exported out of Uganda. So in the Western world, the runways have an addition or have introduced the backloads on the runway, and they look really beautiful. As in, when I saw this, I was like, wow. Knowing that as an African, that we've been part of climate change, we've been part of sustainability as early as the 15th century makes me a very proud African. And I don't know. So when I saw this, it was really, really something I thought, okay, you know what? More people need to know this. And so Ugandans are selling their stories in a positive light and in a way that it should be told. Where I bet if you went to Uganda and find pictures on Africa, you would not see this coming up, because this may not be the story that people want you to see, except you're specifically looking for stories that embellish or stories that highlight the strength of Ugandans. All right, next slide. So, storytelling. Having gone through all of the stories from different parts of Africa and our roots, I thought I should share my own story. So when I came to Canada in 2014 for my MBA program, I loved the place. And just like every other Black person, I had my own fair share of racism, right? Now, a wise man once said that it is not what happens to you that matters, but how you respond or react to what happens to you makes the difference. And so for me, I thought, if I ever get a business here, I want to tell my African story. And so it wasn't surprising that when I wanted to tell my African story, I chose fashion, because it's something that I've been, in fact, it's a passion I've had since I was, a very young girl. And we've told the story with our different clothes, our face masks, but at the turn of this year, I decided to tell the story differently with the launch of the Cheetah hoodie. So what does Cheetah mean? Cheetah means remember. So the Cheetah hoodie design has been created to prompt you or to urge you to remember that you're proudly African. And as an African, you've got the strength, you've got everything within you to be the best you can possibly be. And then we went into details to describe what this artwork means. So each of these unique dots here represents an individual, a unique individual. And we are all connected in some ways, in spite of our race, gender, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. And then our destinies, okay, and fate are interwoven within the universe, and which is represented by the border around it. Someone said it looks like the Great Wall of China, and I think I agree with them. So it's just like it tells you that we're all individuals within an enclosement, and that could be the universe, your environment, your society, whatever it is. And so the whole idea behind this storytelling is, as humans, we rely on one another to achieve our life goals and aspirations. And so we thought that if we could tell more people about what this stands for, then we'll do a better job at telling our stories. In addition to that, I decided to make the story even more significant by driving it home to St. John. So as a St. Johner, or a proud St. Johner, I wanted the product with this story, but that would impact lives in a positive way. And so I chose partners that will reflect the story. So right from the production through to the consumers and the digital and the publicity or the marketing, we're all telling a story. So for most of you who do not know, the hoodies are being produced by key industries. And what key industries do exactly is they provide employment opportunities for Canadians with disabilities. So if I want a story if I really want my African story to be authentic and be impactful, then I needed to be conscious of who my supplier would be. And then the end product of this hoodie is to help towards girl child education. So due to my personal experiences, my business has become vested in women empowerment and girl child education. So for every hoodie that is sold, a girl in West Africa gets a school uniform. Most of you may not understand the impact of a uniform for a girl child. It's like, if you don't have the uniform, you may not be able to go to school. And if more girls would have to go to school and become professionals like Dr. Okonjo-Iweala and so many other African girls out there, more girls will have to come to Canada and St. John to keep impacting the environment and changing lives, then more girls need to go to school. And so I thought it was one way to tell my own African story and make an impact. And then when it comes to choosing the partners that would help sell and market the stories, I chose to work with JCK Media. So JCK Media is a Black-owned business, and the owner of the owner of the business is a young, strong, powerful lady by name Patricia, and she's someone I really respect and having worked with her over the last how many weeks, I'm so proud to work with a woman who understands what it means to support a good cause, because she's so vested in the project as well, and she's doing everything she can to sell the story across Canada and beyond. So, like I mentioned, the Cheetah hoodie is just beyond a hoodie. It's a hoodie that tells a story. And if you see anyone wearing the hoodie, just like I am right now, I just need to show this. So if you see anyone wearing this hoodie, what they're trying to tell you is, remember that we're all connected in some ways. Our destinies are interwoven, and that we can make a difference with whom or where we choose to spend our money. Above all, Cheetah hoodie symbolizes love for humanity and the environment. And so, because we have chosen to streamline the entire supply chain process to reflect our stories and our values, I would say that this is by far one of my greatest achievements. But I'm not resting here until everyone understands what this is about and how we can improve on this. And so that is my own African story as Kaima Design. So let's move on to the next slide. Most of us remember Black Panther. So at the time Black Panther was released in 2018, it received so much buzz around the world that people wanted to know if Wakanda was a real African country or state. Now, Wakanda is a fictitious African country. Not just is it a fictitious African country, it is the desired Pan-African state or country that most Africans would want to see. You remember how I said at the beginning of the presentation that when people go online to look for Africa, the stories we see are stories that dehumanize us as a continent. But what the writers of Black Panther did was to reverse the story and do the exact opposite. So if you follow the story of Wakanda, you're talking about the vast resources and the wealth of the nation, which is the vibranium, which of course brought conflict. And so wealth of resources has a way of attracting conflict because everyone wants a piece of the action. So the story of Wakanda is just the typical story in Africa. However, the settings were just reversed. Now, the cast and crew of Black Panther did an extraordinary job to portray the story of the Marvel company. But Black Panther wouldn't have been as successful as it was without the input of these two people. So these are African Americans, and they chose to tell their African story through Black Panther. I have huge respect for Ryan Coogler. So he was a co-writer and the director of Black Panther. He was chosen because the producers and the owners of the movie understand that if you want a story to be successful, then you want the characters or the key players to connect with the subject matter. And so, as an African American, he could relate to the story. And so he wrote a story that he wanted people to see. And as a director, he was on site to manage the vision and the direction he wanted the story to go. So he wanted to be sure that after he wrote the story, that it would be narrated or told in a way that the audience will understand his angle. Then Ruth Carter is another very talented costume designer. She did not just go to pick existing costumes. She created most of the costumes that were used on set, she created them herself. And for her to be able to do that, she picked different stories. She picked up different symbols. She went across Africa and she brought out very unique pieces, put them together to create the story that we saw. So although the cast of the stories are like the main heroes, for me personally, these two guys are my own heroes because they told the story in an authentic way. They told the story in a way that dignified Africans, in a way that made Africa a desired continent to be. They told the story of Africa as a wealthy nation, as a key player to world issues. So that again makes me very proud as an African. So my question now to you is, what is your story? What story are you telling people at your place of work or within your network? When people call you, "Oh, you African," how does that make you feel? Are you proud? Or do you wish to be someone who you're not? So again, when people look at you in a derogatory way because of the color of your skin, your accent, or even your personality, it all depends on you. If you want to use it as an opportunity to educate and enlighten them, or you want to take that as a personal attack. Quite frankly, most people, and that's my own personal opinion, I've come to realize that when people cast racist attacks or comments at you, it's just a display of their ignorance. Because if they know what you know, or if they know where you're coming from, then they would actually treat you with greater respect. And that's what I tell my kids when they go to school. I was like, no matter what anyone says to you, I want you to know that you are a unique person and you're an incredible girl with a great mission and a bright future. And so do not be stopped by what you hear or see, but if anything, be propelled by your story and your heritage. So as you're thinking about what your story is going to be, because my challenge really for everyone who's listening to me today is, if you've not thought about your own African story, start thinking about it and then decide how you want to tell your story. Because quite honestly, if you don't tell your stories yourself and you allow others to tell your story for you, then you risk a chance of not having not just an incomplete story, but an inaccurate story. So I want you to be able to own your story. So just before I end, I just want to show you the next slide to help you jumpstart or think about your stories. So this year, as we're celebrating the future of the Black race, I just want to take you down to the Black Wall Street. When I heard the story about the Black Wall Street, I was like, wow. So there was actually a place like this in the US where it was like an all Black settlement. It just wasn't a Black, it was a very prosperous Black community. And that struck me. And I said, what lessons can we learn from this? The first lesson here is success is replicable. If they could do it back then, we can do it again. But how can we do it if we don't have a strong and viable economic ecosystem? How can we do it if we don't have a Black education trust fund? How can we do it as Blacks or as Africans if we don't get involved in leadership positions where we could lend our voices to issues that affect the African man, the African girl, or even the African kid at school? And with these quotes from Dr. Claude. It says, you need to build your own businesses and hire your own children. It's absolutely criminal to keep having babies and then sending them into somebody else's neighborhood to beg for a job. And so, as an entrepreneur, I can certainly relate to this. One of the reasons why I decided to run my own business is that having lived in the West for the short time that I have, and I work and have a full-time job, I was like, I would never leave my job as a legacy to my children, but I'll definitely leave my business as a legacy. So if I could put in this much hours to build someone else's ideas and someone else's ideas and visions, then I could as well do that for myself. If only I know how to manage my time. And so far, it's not been easy, but I'll tell you, it's been a very great and wonderful journey doing what I do. And I couldn't be more proud of myself, of my family, for the support that I've received from them. So this brings me to the end of my talk. And I just wanted to say, as a call to action, let us begin to think of ways to promote our culture, our heritage, and our well-being overall as Blacks, because we've got this. We have everything, the skill sets, the knowledge, the power to do that. When I look at St. John, I feel very sad sometimes that we have great professionals. I know how many doctors, how many African doctors in St. John alone who are making great impact, but no one knows their stories beyond their patients and their colleagues. I know we have successful storytellers, journalists, and even graphic animators who are Africans. What are you waiting for? Who are you waiting to tell your stories? I was having a discussion with a friend recently, and we were talking about Black History Live and Black History Month and all that has happened to Black people. And she said, well, the white man needs to be blamed for what we are today because they didn't give us the opportunity. I was like, yeah, the Black man, it's always good to blame someone. But where was the Black man when the white man was going to school and pursuing his career and ambition? We can cast aspersions, we can make excuses all we want, but the fact remains that until we take the reins of our destinies and future, we'll always remain at the bottom. We cannot rise to the top if we don't change our stories and if we don't change our circumstances. The onus is on us to change it so that in future, we'll have a legacy for our children and generations unborn. Thank you. Questions? Next slide.
Christine, that was phenomenal. That was strong. We ended the series strong, and your message of Black self-sufficiency for all Black people, diaspora as well as continental, is needed now more than ever. You sounded like Malcolm X or Ida B. Wells or Mark Harvey. Good stuff. It's definitely stuff that we as Black people, whether you as a continental African or me as a diaspora African, it's definitely the kind of stuff we've been hearing in our communities for the last century, and it's 100% correct. The Black Wall Street you referred to was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was burnt to the ground in 1921 in a racist attack by white Tulsans, and there's a whole history on that. You might want to Google that if you're listening to that. We have some people who are just talking to you in the chat here, Christine. Sian has been on for the whole day, and he says he's wearing his Cheddar hoodie right now. And,
who is that?
Sian, S-E-U-N.
Sheung, Sheung, thank you so much. He has the blue Cheddar and he displays it so proudly. Thank you so much, Sheung. I really love that.
Yes.
So now we can twin on camera.
And Ola10 says, right, spot on, Christine. Elizabeth says, such an important message. Tell your own story and celebrate success. She thanks you. And Cian said the same thing. Great presentation. Really a learning point for me again. He says you need to be in a TED Talk.
Thank you. I've never thought about that, but well, if you're going to support me, I think I'll try to do that.
Heather thanks you again for everything that you do. She says she's very grateful for your presentation and for sharing. And Mary said it was a beautiful presentation. She has a question. She wants to know how you balance everything with 3 children, and you know, how do you juggle everything? Because she's a single mom and she juggles a lot of stuff: full-time work and children and education. So how do you balance everything?
Okay, thank you very much, Mary, and that's a very great question. I would say when I started off, it was very difficult for me, and one of the things I did was I had to compartmentalize my activities, and I had to put time to what I do. So again, it comes with a lot of sacrifice. So usually from morning until like 5 p.m., it's my job. And as soon as I shut down my laptop, I open my business laptop and then my family. And then one way to help with around the family with my kids, I delegate responsibilities to them such that I make them responsible for some actions and some tasks at home. So exactly. Weekends usually I make food, you know, for the week, and then in between the week I just tell them. So they have a menu table, for example, and I tell them, well, you know what you have. Make sure that every item, everything you need in the fridge is available. Okay, on the list. So as soon as I get that settled, so I have the raw food, and I've been able to teach them how to make their own food. So when I have my own me time for the business and myself, they don't need me. So by the way, and again, I don't know how old your children are. So my youngest just turned 11, so they're old enough to be delegated some of those tasks to, right? And so yes, that works for me. And then finally, the other thing I do is like I get them involved in my business. Like I said, I'm going to leave a legacy for them. I don't want them to like inherit something they never knew anything about, and then they end up having that, you know, acquiring and kind of like entitled mentality, right? So yeah, I get them involved. So my youngest, for example, she sews. So she had to like start up her own scrunchies business. So I'm so proud when I see her sewing her scrunchies. Then my second daughter, I make her do some of my social media posts. So she helped me, like she takes the pictures and then she kind of like edits them on Canva. And then my eldest, sometimes I guess like, you know what, I need a caption. Can you do this one? So when they see how involved they are sometimes, so they try not to bother me when it's my me time, because usually when I'm trying to get busy and I see them around, then I was like, oh yes, I was going to do something. You come and do this for me. So sometimes they just walk when I'm working on my job, or they rather not be around sometimes, because they know as soon as they come, I'm definitely delegating something to them. So I've been able to work out something that works.
And what you and of course what you do by delegating responsibilities to your children is you actually give them a sense of self-empowerment, because you tell them that I trust you to do this. I'm going to teach you how to do it, and I expect you to do it correctly. I'll teach you how to do it if you're not doing it right, but I trust you to do it, and you know I love you and have trust in you and trust you that much, and that builds a lot in the child. So kudos to you on that, and I hope that information helps you, Mary. Got another question for you, Christine. You know, I understand that you have 3 daughters, and you're obviously a woman yourself, and you're very dedicated to the girl child. But I think that the information that you're sharing is universal. It's really universal for anybody, and particularly for Black people in general. I think that if you're a Black man listening to this, everything you said could be applied there as well.
Absolutely.
You know, it's all really good stuff. I'm curious as to where you got your design skills. I love that cheddar hoodie.
Thank you very much. So it was inspired by a South African bead. So I can't share this. It's like, so South Africans have a very unique way of telling their stories as well. Okay, through their beading system. So you could tell a married woman from a single woman from the type of beads that they wear.
Right.
So that particular design the inspiration came from from a married woman's beaded skirt. So I modified it, and I was able to put in the story that I wanted to replicate. So yeah, it was something I created, and I got a designer to bring it to life for me.
Excellent, excellent. And you found the supplier here, which is Key Industries now. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And I happen to have several of your masks. I should tell the audience that because you're one of our board members, and they're lovely masks.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for that. So just an outstanding presentation for everyone. Again, men and women. Christine's words ring true, much like many of the Black leaders, whether African or diaspora, that have been around over the past few centuries. Self-sufficiency is key, however you do it. I know we all have different situations. Some people's situations are better than other people's situations, no matter where you're living in this world. But the closer you can get to any kind of self-sufficiency is the best way to do it. Baby steps. If you can't be self-sufficient, find another Black person who's doing a thing that you can support. Get behind that. Could be small. Doesn't matter. Self-sufficiency is the key. So, Christine, we want to thank you again for your speech today, for your presentation today. It was really deep, really powerful.
Thank you.
Continued success in your business, and I also want to thank everyone that tuned in today, our audience. We really appreciate it. Olatan said that well done, Christine, and thank Prue. We want to thank everybody for following our speaker series, and we do understand that some of you have signed up for a raffle. We have some Prude swag we're going to raffle off. That's going to happen next week, and people that there's going to be a raffle for every speech we've had, every talk we've had. So that's 10 things, and the person that wins the drawing, the drawing will get an email. So that'll be 10 emails sent out to people who can choose whatever Prude swag they like. So again, I want to remind you all that the replays of the Prude speaker series are available until the end of the week on this site, and then they will move over to the Prude YouTube channel where you can watch them in perpetuity. Okay, so everyone have a great day, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.